Welcome back to the Chattable podcast, where we learn real English in real life, enrich vocabulary, and feel proud.
It is great to be back for another episode.
So I want you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second. Imagine a 200-pound stone wheel just violently crushing wheat into dust.
Oh, wow, yeah. Heavy imagery right off the bat.
Right. Or, imagine a Formula One car taking a corner at 150 miles per hour, and its tires are just screaming, like literally inches from a solid concrete wall.
Just zero margin for error there.
Exactly. So what do those two incredibly extreme physical scenarios have to do with, say, getting a promotion at your desk job or mastering a new language?
Well, a lot more than you'd think, honestly.
Yeah, today we're exploring two really evocative English phrases that are totally rooted in brutal physical effort. We're talking about being on the grind and hugging the line.
Two of my absolute favorites. We throw these idioms around so casually in everyday conversation,
Yeah.
but they carry these incredibly vivid stories about human endurance and high-stakes geometry.
They really do. We're going to unpack why our modern ideas of ambition and precision are so tied to this intense physical history and, give you the tools to use them with total confidence.
Which is so important because understanding the history actually changes how you use the words.
Totally. So let's jump right into the brutal friction of success with our first phrase, on the grind.
Oh, the grind. Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, to really capture the sheer scale of exhaustion this phrase implies, you have to look at someone like Novak Djokovic.
Oh, absolutely. The perfect example.
Right. Like, he didn't just casually become the tennis player with the most Grand Slams in history. He spent years, literally years, as the underdog, constantly chasing Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal.
Just relentlessly trying to close that gap.
Yeah. Think about the 2012 Australian Open final against Nadal. That match lasted 5 hours and 53 minutes.
Which is just absurd.
It is. By the time they reached the trophy presentation, tournament officials literally had to bring out chairs because neither man could physically stand up.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, Djokovic was just relentlessly on the grind, pushing through a level of physical depletion that, most of us can't even fathom.
Well, and when you look at the literal mechanics of the word grind, you realize exactly why it is so appropriate for that specific level of exhaustion.
Right, because it goes way back.
Oh, way back. Like centuries before it was a hashtag used by tech entrepreneurs, it described the heaviest, most grueling physical labor imaginable.
Like the stone wheels.
Exactly. Before modern machinery, a massive stone wheel in a mill would physically crush wheat into flour just hour after hour. Or consider a medieval blacksmith in a forge.
Sweating over a fire.
Yeah, they would take a completely dull, raw piece of iron and physically press it against a spinning grindstone.
And a grindstone doesn't just sharpen metal by, gently rubbing against it. It's violent.
Oh, it's incredibly violent.
It works through this repetitive, massive friction. It literally tears away microscopic pieces of the metal. Sparks are showering the room. It is a destructive, painstaking process.
And that right there is the core insight of the phrase. Being on the grind doesn't just mean working hard.
Right. It's more than that.
It means allowing your environment and your efforts to painfully strip away your flaws, until only the sharpest version of you remains.
That is such a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, the key words embedded in this history are really repetitive motion, massive friction, and a very long duration.
So we basically took that visceral image, the sparks flying, the crushing weight of a mill wheel, and we morphed it into modern slang.
We really did.
Now, being on the grind means hustling, right? Practicing constantly or working intensely toward a really difficult goal. You hear it constantly in sports, academic programs, and it is absolutely foundational to startup culture.
Oh, totally. The emotional and professional experience of building a company from scratch feels remarkably similar to pressing raw metal against a spinning stone.
Constant friction.
Exactly. You wake up every single day and face that repetitive friction against whatever obstacles is in your way.
But I do want to be very clear for you, the listener, about when this phrase does not apply. Because we use it so often, it's easy to kind of dilute the meaning.
Right. People use it for everything.
Yeah. But to be on the grind, there must be friction. Like if you are coasting on your natural charisma to close sales, playing solitaire on your second monitor, and pulling in a 6-figure salary without breaking a sweat.
Which sounds like a great setup, by the way.
Right. Sign me up. You might be highly successful in that scenario, but you are absolutely not on the grind. You're just coasting.
Yeah, zero friction.
And if you are lounging on a beach in Hawaii, sipping a piña colada, you are completely disqualified. Friction and fatigue are mandatory.
Because without the resistance, the metal never gets sharp. The grind literally requires pushback from the world.
I do want to challenge the idea that this resistance has to be strictly physical, though, because our sources highlighted this fascinating real-world example.
Oh, the kid in New York.
Yeah, little 7-year-old Leo. So Leo wakes up at dawn every weekend to practice his tennis swing. The physical repetition is obvious there. But he also spends his time intensely studying the emotional regulation of his hero, Roger Federer.
Which is wild for a 7-year-old to even care about.
I know, but to me that sounds like a severe mental grind. So, I mean, can a purely psychological effort still qualify?
It absolutely qualifies. And, in many ways, the mental friction can be far more taxing than the physical.
Really? How so?
Well, think about the internal neurology of a 7-year-old kid. When a kid double faults on a tennis court, their natural biological instinct is to throw their racket and throw a tantrum.
Oh, for sure. Total meltdown.
Right. So to actively suppress that instinct, to channel a professional athlete's icy calm, requires immense internal resistance. He is literally fighting his own developing brain.
Wow. Yeah. That mental discipline.
Exactly. That daily effort to rewrite his own emotional responses is incredibly exhausting work. Little Leo is definitely out there on the grind.
Okay, so whether you are physically running drills until you collapse or, mentally wrestling with your own emotions, you are in the messy, exhausting phase of chasing a goal.
The blunt force phase, yeah.
Right. The blunt force of endurance gets you into the room. It gets Djokovic to the finals. But here is the catch. Once you survive the grind, once you reach the very top tier of an industry or a sport,
everyone else there has also survived the grind.
Exactly. Raw effort is no longer a competitive advantage at that level. It's just the baseline requirement to even compete.
Yeah, the margins just shrink to zero. Survival gets you to the top, but the nature of the game shifts entirely if you actually want to stay there.
You have to move from blunt force endurance to absolute millimeter perfect precision. And that brings us perfectly to our second target phrase for this episode.
Hug the line.
Yes,
oh, yeah.
Hug the line. I was reading a breakdown of Iva Jovic, the American teenage tennis sensation, and a commentator described her hitting a forehand winner that was, quote, hugging the sideline.
I just love the brilliant irony of that phrase, don't you?
How do you mean?
Well, we take the word hug, which is arguably the ultimate human gesture of warmth, affection, safety, and we weaponize it. We turn it into a term about high-stakes, ruthless, millimeter-perfect geometry.
Oh, that is so true. Instead of a soft embrace, we're talking about a tennis ball traveling at 100 miles an hour, spinning violently, and landing maybe 2 millimeters inside a painted white line on a hard court.
Yeah, the ball is hugging the boundary.
It's close enough to touch disaster without actually crossing into it.
Exactly. We basically stripped all the emotion away from the word and just kept the spatial closeness. In sports mechanics, if a fast-moving object hugs the line, it is traveling or landing as close to the boundary edge as physically possible without triggering a penalty.
Which is terrifying if you think about it.
Oh, completely. And while it's an essential phrase for tennis commentary, the physics of this concept apply anywhere the margins are razor thin.
Like racing, Formula One has to be the ultimate expression of this.
Oh, absolutely. Think of a driver like Lewis Hamilton.
Racing through the narrow streets of Monaco.
Yeah, exactly, Monaco. When Hamilton takes a sharp corner at 150 miles per hour, centrifugal force naturally wants to throw the car outward, away from the curve.
Right, just basic physics.
So to maintain his maximum speed and travel the shortest possible distance, he has to keep his car as tight to the inside curve of the track as physically possible.
So if he drifts like 1 inch too far outside, he travels a longer distance and loses a fraction of a second to the guy behind him.
Yes.
But if he hugs the inside line too closely, his tire clips the concrete barrier, his suspension shatters, and his race is instantly over.
Boom. Done. The margin of error is basically non-existent.
Wow.
He is maximizing his advantage by getting as close to disaster as possible without actually triggering the disaster. That is the true essence of hugging the line.
Okay, I have to challenge the broader applications of this, though.
Go for it.
Because our sources mention that hugging the line is frequently used as a metaphor in business, too. Like a corporation operating on the absolute edge of legal rules, perhaps exploiting a very narrow tax loophole.
Right, corporate strategy.
But isn't that a fundamentally different psychology compared to a sporting event?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Well, think about it. In a tennis match, if the ball crosses the line, you lose a single point. In the corporate world, if you cross the legal line, the federal authorities show up and executives go to prison. The stakes are wildly disproportionate.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. The consequences are obviously much more severe, yes, but I actually disagree completely that the psychology is different.
Really? How are they the same?
Because the mechanics of the risk are identical. The danger is the entire point. When a company is described as hugging the line legally, the speaker is acknowledging that the corporation is deliberately taking a massive risk to maximize their competitive advantage.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they have armies of lawyers acting as umpires trying to find that 1 millimeter of gray area. They aren't technically breaking the law, but they are close enough to smell the fresh paint on the boundary.
So they are willingly operating in a space where one misstep ruins them because the financial reward of being in that space is just so high.
Exactly that. If they play it safe and stay right in the dead middle of the tax code, they lose their financial edge to a competitor who is willing to take the risk.
The tension is the same as the race car driver.
Precisely. The phrase captures that tension perfectly and tells you that the margin for error is essentially zero.
Which means, by definition, you can never use the phrase hug the line to describe a safe conservative action.
Oh, never.
Like if Iva Jovic hits a tennis ball straight down the dead center of the court, that shot is entirely safe. It might be a smart strategic move, but it is definitely not hugging the line.
Right. Staying in the middle is the exact opposite of hugging the line. You have to be pushing up against an absolute limit.
And just to reinforce the linguistic irony you pointed out earlier, I think it is crucial to remember that we do not use this phrase for literal human affection anymore.
Good point, yes.
Like if a massive pop star like Taylor Swift greets her fans after a concert, she might give them a literal hug. She does not hug the line with her fans. The context of the phrase has to be spatial, competitive, and precise.
It perfectly illustrates how English relies so heavily on context. The temperature of the word hug completely changes depending on whether you were talking about Taylor Swift or a Formula One race car.
It really does. So let's look at the complete picture we've built in this episode. For you, the listener, mastering these two phrases equips you with a powerful, highly descriptive vocabulary for the two distinct phases of high-level success.
A really useful toolkit.
Yeah. First, you have the relentless, painful, flaw-stripping process of the grind. Whether it's Djokovic exhausting himself over 5 hours on a court, or a 7-year-old fighting his own neurology to master his emotions, it is about enduring friction.
And then once that blunt force endurance gets you into the elite tier, you need the vocabulary for razor-edge precision.
Right, the second phase.
That is where you hug the line. You push your performance or your business strategy as close to the absolute boundary as physically or legally possible to maintain your advantage.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to kind of chew on. We live in this incredibly abstract digital age. We talk about cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and, frictionless digital transactions.
Everything is in the cloud now.
Right. We have billionaires building these virtual empires. But isn't it fascinating how our modern vocabulary for elite success still entirely relies on primitive physical sensations?
It's so true. It's incredibly revealing about how the human brain actually works.
We still understand the world and our own ambition through weight, friction, and spatial boundaries. When we want to describe the complex legal strategy of a modern corporation or the psychological discipline of an athlete, our language proves something amazing.
What's that?
That we still subconsciously view success through the lens of crushing medieval grinding stones and intense, high-speed physical closeness.
It really shows that no matter how sophisticated our tools become or how digital our world gets, the human experience of effort and risk remains entirely physical at its core.
I love that. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Keep paying attention to the heavy physical history hiding inside your everyday vocabulary.
It's everywhere once you start looking.
It really is. So whether you are currently pushing through the friction of the grind or preparing to hug the line with your next big risk, keep practicing your English, and we will see you next time on the Chattable Podcast.